Now let's talk about setting up your empire. This entire business is about building this valuable asset, this growing, almost living little organism that you're going to make scale and grow. And week to week, month to month, hopefully year to year, it's going to get bigger and become more and more valuable. So it's critical that you do some things in the beginning on how you set up and structure your empire. Now, if you already have an app business, there's flexibility to make some changes to do some of the recommendations that I'm going to give you. Or if down the road you want to make some changes, you'll be able to make those changes as well. But it's critical that you set up and structure your empire in a certain way, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, the first thing I do want to say is I'm not an attorney. I'm not a professional accountant. None of what I'm about to tell you can be, deemed as professional advice. Consult your own professionals for how you should go about doing things. But I'm going to give you some recommendations on what I'm doing and why, and hopefully you can take something away from that. Let's talk about your corporate structure. I recommend that you set up two companies, one for games and one for non-games. Now, maybe you have no interest in developing games. That's okay. But if you do, you need to set up two companies, I believe. One that will be just for games and one for all the non-game apps. So anything else that you're going to do. Now, you should consider games because game apps are one of the biggest segments of the entire app ecosystem, and they're very, very profitable and make a lot of money. In fact, some of the companies making the most money in the app world are doing it with games. There are some benefits to games. Game players are very fickle. They can, but that's a good thing. So they download a lot of different apps. They spend a lot of time in many different types of games, and a lot of times they'll also be, kind of repeat customers, so to speak. They'll get involved with your other games if you have more than one. They'll come back and use them more often. And all those little factors I'm talking about end up making you more money. Now, there's tremendous opportunity for non-games, millions of dollars. So you don't have to do games. I'm just saying, if you're going to consider doing games at all, I suggest you set up a separate company. Now listen, when you create developer accounts with Apple, with Google Play, with these other app stores like Amazon, and we're going to get into all that, you can put your company name on the account, or you can put a personal name on the account. Now, the cheapest way to go, if you're on a really small budget, you can just do it under your own name, and you can change that later. However, if you can afford it, I recommend you start out with a company name. Set up the account, the developer account that is, under a company name, and build it out from there, because it has some different advantages. There's some App Store SEO benefits for company names. Not only are app names and app descriptions found using keywords, but so are company names. Now, if you're thinking about creating a company name stuffed with keywords, it's not going to work. It can possibly work a little bit, and we're going to get more into that when we talk about doing competitive research and spying and those kinds of things, but there are some benefits SEO-wise to using a company name because it's another way for people to find you. And if you're going to go into a specific niche, let's say, for some huge opportunity that you think there is with a certain type of music app or just whatever, then you may want to use keywords related to that market in the company name. But ultimately, you want to think about building a brand. You want to think about coming up with a great name and hopefully having a really great logo. Because everything to do with apps and this whole digital world is visual. People see apps, the icons, the interfaces. That's pretty much what people see. They don't see the code behind the scenes. They see the graphics. So it's important that you have hopefully a cool logo or something memorable that you can brand. Now, because users are faced with so many different apps, and because you're going to learn to build an app network, hopefully of millions and millions of people, you need to have a brand. You need to have something that people can remember, trust, feel good about, kind of relate to when they see certain things. Think of it like you're building your own MTV, like your own cable network, or Lifetime Television or ABC. That's kind of what an app network is becoming. This new media world is going to be huge. I mean, there are already apps right now, like Angry Birds, for example, that get more users than the number of people that watch American Idol, the #1 TV show in the world. So apps are very, very important. There are all sorts of apps out there that are getting incredible name recognition and are reaching millions and millions of people around the globe. So focus on building a brand And that's what you can do with a company name that you can't really do with an individual name. I recommend using LLCs. Now, if you're not in the United States, you may have different types of corporations. But an LLC is a limited liability corporation where you can pass profits directly to yourself personally, and then when you file your taxes every year, again, this isn't accounting advice or legal advice, but it's a much cleaner, more simple way to do things. And this is what we do, or I do personally. I have multiple LLCs. You can go to incorporate.com, you can create one for about $250. I usually create mine in Delaware. Delaware is a very corporate-friendly state for not only for taxes, but for any kind of litigation and other reasons. You can do your own research on why to form a corporation in Delaware. But I recommend LLCs. Again, if you live in a country outside the U.S., you can just form any kind of corporation, that you can at home that makes sense. But you want to create corporations so the corporation, which is like a living entity, owns the assets of the app business. It kind of owns the apps, and of course you own the corporation. Let's do an exercise. You should go to uspto.gov, that's the United States Patent Trademark Office website, and do trademark searches. Start thinking of unique company names, kind of what you potentially brand for your app business. Again, if you're on a small budget, you may want to just use your name in the beginning. That's okay. Use your personal name. But ultimately, I would like you to think bigger and really, I'm trying to help you make the most money possible ultimately with this stuff. And to do that, you're going to build a brand, you're going to build a company. And so start thinking of some unique names maybe for your app business. Also, if you're going to do games, think of one for your games business, and then think of a different one for just other apps, like a media company. Maybe you want like Rascal Media or something like that. It doesn't matter. But think of some names and do some trademark searches to see if those names are already being used, because you don't want to run into kind of trademark conflicts. Now, you may think that you have to have the .com domain name to go with your company name, and while that would be really nice, it's not it's not a definite. It's not absolutely necessary. It would be a bonus. One of the things you can do is you can go to buydomains.com, the word buy, B-U-Y, and then domains.com. It's a huge marketplace for domains that are for sale, and you can get some ideas on different names just by looking at the domains, even if you don't buy them. Usually domains that aren't being used, typically there's no trademark for them, or there's no company that's active with those names because they would want to use the name and no one's using it. That's not always the case, so you want to do trademark searches to try to get some ideas of what you can use and what won't kind of cross over the other people's intellectual property or trademarks. But that's how you can get some good company names. So go and do that and start thinking about what you're going to name your app business or app businesses in the case of having separate companies for games and for non-apps. Now, the other reason to separate games is because there are specific services for game app companies, specific ad networks, specific revenue opportunities, specific types of programs to monetize your games, and if you do games, and you can't really kind of cross over and have other apps, or it gets confusing. When you set up an account that I'm going to teach you how to set up to track your stats and your analytics and everything else, you don't want to cross over kind of game data with non-game data. And you'll learn why that is. And again, it's because there are specific app networks, specific ways to make money with games, as well as there are specific ones with non-games. And so that's kind of the reason to keep it separate if possible. So go and do some trademark searches. Try to come up with some cool company names for what you're going to be doing here with apps. Do a little brainstorming. If you have a spouse, ask them for some ideas. And come up with some names that you're thrilled about, you'll be happy about. And, you can always file a corporate name change in the future at any time to change that name. But try to make a decision on coming up with company names. And if you have the budget for it, go ahead and set up those corporations. So the next step that we're going to get to here pretty soon is having you create developer accounts where you're going to need to file the corporate documents, like with Apple, for example, to actually set up a developer account in order to upload apps to that account in that company name.